Now we got to learn how to round with significant digits as well. Okay, so when you are adding and subtracting, you're going to add the way that you normally do. So for example, 8,000 plus 9.721. Let me go ahead and add that together. We're going to do this example here. 8,000 plus 9.721. You just add that like you normally would with a calculator. So the answer to this is 8,009.721. I should have known that without putting that in my calculator. Kilometers, okay? But you have to round according to some certain rules, okay? So when you add or subtract, your final answer should be rounded off to the least number of decimal places. So when you look at 8,000, there are no decimal places here, none. When you look at 9.721, there are 3 decimals, right? It goes to the thousandths place. So we have to round off to the least number. So we are limited by this one because it has actually no decimals. So our final answer also needs to have no decimals. So these 3 here need to be crossed out or rounded. So we need to round our answer. So 8,009, we need to have it end with the 9. But when you look at the number right after, remember that if the number is above, the number 5 or above, you round the number up. So this is going to be rounded to 8,010, right? Because if we said 8,009, this 7 right here is indicating that it should be that if we're going to round to the ones place, we need to round up because this number is above the number is 5 or above. So our final answer is going to be 8,010 kilometers to match the least number of decimals. So let's try this one now. So we're going to do 104.06 plus 4.1. So when we just add that like normal, our answer is 108.16 inches, right? And now we need to look at the decimal places. This one has 2 decimal places, and this one has just 1 decimal place, right? So our final answer also needs to only have 1 decimal place. So we can keep that 1 right there. So we look at the number after. The number after is a 6. That's 5 or above. So our answer needs to be 108.2. This number is going to go up because the number past it is a 6. 108.2 inches. All right, let's try a couple more. 5,105 minus 4364. So when I just actually subtract that, I get 741 miles. Now, both of these have no decimal places. So our final answer needs to also have no decimal places. And it actually already does. So this is an easy one because we don't have to do any rounding. It already has no decimal places. And now there's one other kind of unique one here, 2,300 minus 128. You have one problem like this on your lesson, so I wanted to include it. This is a little bit of a more rare circumstance, but when I subtract that, I get 2172. Now, when you look at these, both of these have no decimal places, right? And so you might think, okay, we just need to have no decimal places. And so it's going to be 2172 because that one also has no decimal places. But if you notice, these are trailing zeros. And trailing, like we said earlier, trailing zeros don't count if there's not a decimal present. And so they actually don't count. We need to round off to match actually this number right here. So this answer needs to be 20, we're going to round it to 2,200 centimeters because it was 2172. We can only keep up to this digit right here. And so the 7 afterward makes me round up. This is a unique situation. You see one on your lesson, I think, like this, where you see zeros at the end with no decimal present. You need to round to the digit before it. And you match that all the way down. So 2,200 centimeters. So that's how you round with adding and subtracting. When you are multiplying and dividing, the rules are a little bit different, but they, to me, are a little bit easier for me. So in multiplying and dividing, you perform your multiplication like normal. So for example, let's do number 1. 2130 times 0.0 squared, because centimeters times centimeters, nothing cancels out, so we have to include the unit. And now to round, you round off to the least number of significant digits, not decimal places. So how many significant digits does this number have? Well, these three are significant. And remember that trailing zeros don't count if a decimal is not present. Like, this is the rule right here for that. So it's a trailing zero, it doesn't count. So this one only has 3 significant digits. 0.030, leading zeros never count. And then this is a trailing zero, but a decimal is present, and so it does count. This one has 2 significant digits. And so between 3 and 2, we're limited by the lowest one. So we're limited by the 2. So our final answer can only have 2 significant digits. Okay, and right now it has 3, 63.9. We need to round it to 2. So I'm going to round that to 64. Okay, because that has 2 significant digits. If I said 63 instead, that wouldn't be accurate, because you look at the number afterward, the next number, and if it's 5 or higher, then you round this previous number up 1 to 64. So my answer is going to be 64 centimeters squared. Let's try another one, but with division. So 20,051 divided by 26. I get 771.192308, like a really long number. Okay, so now again, we need to count our significant digits. 20,051, these zeros are sandwiched, and so they are going to count. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant digits there. And then the 26, both of these count because they're both non-zeros. So we're limited by the 2 here this time. So our final answer can only have 2 significant digits, and it helps me to write it out. We need to stop after this one, right? 771, because those are the only, we can only have 2 significant digits. And so I need to round this to either 770, or, because remember that trailing zeros don't count. So I can write it this way, and the 0 at the end is not going to count. Or I could say 780 if this number is 5 or higher. But that number is just a 1. And so I'm going to just keep it at 770. And these 2 are our significant digits. This one does not count because there is no decimal present. And so we have rounded to the right number. And then I'll include my units because they didn't cancel out, the kilograms and the meters. And that is my answer right there. I'm going to try another 2 because I know this can be a little bit tricky at first. So let's do number 3, 8.0 times 0.06. So I get 0.48 millimeters squared. Okay. And now we count the significant digits. So 8.0, this is a trailing 0, but trailing zeros count with a decimal present. And so since there is a decimal present, all 2 of these count. This one right here has 2 leading zeros, and leading zeros never count. So this one actually only has 1 significant digit. So we need to round off this answer to 1 significant digit. So we can really only keep this digit. So we need to look at the digit after and say, okay, is it 5 or higher? The answer is yes. And so we need to round this to 0.5 millimeters squared as our answer here. Last one, 6.3 times 2.0. And I'm getting 12.6 feet squared. This has 2 significant digits. Both of them are non-zeros. This one also has 2 because this is a trailing 0. It's a trailing 0, but there is a decimal present. There's a decimal present. And remember that trailing zeros with a decimal present do count. So both of them are 2. So we need to round off to 2. We can only keep the 1 and the 2 right here. So we're going to look at this number and say, okay, it's 5 or higher. It's a 6. And so we're going to round off to 13 feet squared. And that is how you count significant digits and round with significant digits. And if you have any questions at all, please join my classroom and I can go through it a little bit slower with you. And I'm super happy to help you with anything that you need. Have a great day.